Hey everybody, welcome to this Gold IRA Blueprint Deep Dive. And today we're going to be talking about gold IRAs. We've got a really interesting batch of articles from you all, so thank you for those. We're going to kind of like take all that information and we're going to distill it down to like the most important points, specifically for you as an American retiree. So some of the things we're going to cover, obviously, like what is a gold IRA? Why even consider holding gold for your retirement? We'll also dig into things like how this might be good for people with global families, tax implications, and estate planning. And of course, some actionable steps that you can take if you're interested in learning more.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We were talking a little bit beforehand about the history of gold as an asset class. For centuries, it's been seen as this kind of the store of value, the safe haven in times of like economic turmoil.
Oh, for sure. It totally sets the stage for why people are thinking about it in retirement now, especially with everything that's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And if this is something that you're considering learning more about, I know a great resource is goldirablueprint.com/exclusive. They have a free checklist there that helps you choose the right gold IRA company for you.
Oh, that's awesome. And we'll remind everybody about that towards the end as well. So before we get too far into it, what is a gold IRA?
Sure. So a gold IRA is a self-directed individual retirement account. But instead of holding paper assets like stocks and bonds, it lets you hold physical gold as part of your retirement portfolio.
Physical gold.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're talking like actual gold bullion.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like the visual of that.
Yeah.
But why would you want to do that?
Right. So the main reason why people are interested in gold, specifically for retirement, is because it's often considered a hedge against inflation.
Okay.
So, as the purchasing power of the dollar declines, gold tends to either hold its value or increase in value.
So it kind of like protects you a little bit
Right, exactly.
from
So like that.
the effects of inflation.
And, the World Gold Council actually put out some interesting data. They reported that the average annual return for gold over the last 20 years was 9.17%.
That's pretty good.
Yes.
Especially considering the volatility of the market in the last 20 years.
For sure. So another reason people look at gold as a part of their retirement portfolio is that it's seen as this global asset. It's recognized and traded globally, no matter what's happening with any particular country's currency or political situation.
So like it's inherently stable.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So are there other reasons why people might add it to their portfolio?
There is one more to consider, although it's typically seen as a secondary reason. It's the potential for protection against political risk.
Okay.
So gold, as a tangible asset, can act as a safeguard against things like, government seizures of assets or financial instability in politically volatile regions.
So it's not just protection from inflation, but also things that can happen
that affect traditional finances. Right. It's about having a diversified approach to risk management, especially when you're thinking about the long term.
For sure. So we've got inflation, global stability, and political risk. Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier about people with global families. Why is that relevant?
Yeah, so for people with global families, they might have family members living in different countries, and they're concerned about, different regulations, different currencies, and gold kind of acts as this unifying asset that transcends those borders.
That's really interesting.
And, that brings us to another aspect, which is estate planning.
Oh, yeah. Estate planning is super important, especially when you've got a family in multiple countries.
Right.
So how do gold IRAs play into all this?
Well, much like traditional IRAs, gold IRAs let you designate beneficiaries.
Oh, okay. So you can ensure that your loved ones are taken care of.
Exactly.
Even if they live in a different country.
And this can help avoid a lot of the headaches that come with probate court.
So it'll make it easier on your family to deal with all this after you're gone. What about taxes, though? I'm sure there are a lot of complications with taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. Navigating cross-border tax laws and estate planning can be really complex. One of the things that families need to be aware of is the potential for double taxation, where the same income or assets are taxed in both the U.S. and their home country.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
Is there any way to avoid that?
Thankfully, there is. There are tax treaties between the U.S. and other countries that can help reduce or even eliminate double taxation.
Oh, okay.
So it's really important to research and understand those treaties.
So is that something where you'd want to talk to a professional?
Absolutely. It's always a good idea to consult with a knowledgeable advisor who specializes in international tax law.
Got it. So we talked about the tax implications for global families. Right. But what about just in the U.S.? Are gold IRAs taxed any differently than traditional IRAs?
That's a great question. In terms of tax advantages, gold IRAs are treated very similarly to traditional IRAs. You benefit from tax-deferred growth, meaning you don't pay taxes on your earnings until you withdraw the funds in retirement.
That makes sense. So you get that tax-free growth until you need the money.
Exactly. And just like traditional IRAs, there are two main types of gold IRAs, traditional and Roth.
Oh, yeah, I've heard those terms before.
Uh,
What's the difference between them?
so with a traditional gold IRA, your contributions may be tax deductible, which can potentially lower your tax bill now,
Okay.
but you will pay taxes on the withdrawals when you retire.
So it's like a tax break now.
Right.
Versus...
With a Roth Gold IRA, you're not going to get the tax deduction up front, but your withdrawals in retirement will be tax-free.
So it just depends on if you'd rather have the tax break now or later?
Exactly.
What about contribution limits?
So yeah, just like traditional IRAs, the IRS sets annual contribution limits for gold IRAs. For 2025, the limit is $6,500 or $7,500 if you're 50 or older.
Okay, so there are limits. Now let's say somebody's listening and they think this is really cool. What's the next step?
So one of the most important steps is to find an IRS-approved custodian.
Oh, a custodian. What does a custodian do?
So a custodian is a financial institution that holds and manages the assets in your IRA.
Oh, okay.
And they ensure everything is compliant with IRS regulations.
So they're like protecting you.
Right, exactly.
Making sure everything's legal and above board.
And they handle the storage and administration of your precious metals.
Interesting.
Gives you peace of mind.
For sure.
Knowing that your assets are secure.
Okay, so finding a custodian.
That's step number one. And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all the options, you can always check out that website we mentioned earlier, goldirablueprint.com/exclusive. They've got that free checklist there to help you choose the right company.
Yeah, that's super valuable to make sure you're working with someone you trust.
Right.
So we've talked about custodians. Let's get back into estate planning a little bit more.
Sure.
So what are some of the strategies people should be thinking about?
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the most important things is designating your beneficiaries.
Right.
Because it can really help your heirs avoid probate court.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with that.
Exactly. And then there's also a strategy called the Stretch IRA.
Oh, a stretch IRA.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
So with the Stretch IRA, your beneficiaries can stretch out the tax-deferred growth of the inherited IRA over their own lifetimes.
Oh, wow.
So instead of taking a lump sum all at once, and getting hit with a huge tax bill, they can spread it out and potentially benefit from that continued tax-deferred growth.
So you're giving them an amazing gift.
Exactly.
By structuring it this way.
It can create a lasting legacy for future generations.
That's amazing. Are there any other estate planning techniques we should be aware of?
Another option is to consider using an IRA-owned trust.
Oh, interesting.
And this can provide more control over how and when assets are distributed to your beneficiaries.
So it gives you more flexibility?
Right. For example, you can specify certain conditions that must be met before distributions are made. Or you can set up a schedule for disbursements over time.
So you can really customize it.
Exactly.
But it sounds complicated.
Yeah, it can be a bit complex, so it's important to plan carefully and make sure it complies with IRS regulations.
So probably talk to a professional.
Absolutely. I definitely recommend seeking expert legal advice.
Okay, that makes sense. So we talked about a lot of really good stuff today.
Yeah.
From the basics of gold IRAs to how they can potentially benefit you in retirement, and even some estate planning strategies.
Yeah.
So I think our listeners are probably feeling pretty well informed right now.
I hope so.
But of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn
For sure.
about gold IRAs and how they could potentially help you reach your retirement goal.
Absolutely.
So before we sign off, I want to remind everyone about Gold IRA blueprint.com/exclusive. Remember, they've got that free checklist there to help you choose the right gold IRA company.
It's a great starting point if you're just beginning your research.
So as you continue to move towards your retirement goals and think about your future, think about how a gold IRA might potentially fit into your plan.
That's a great point.
And remember, keep learning, keep asking questions, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
See you, Shaw. Yeah, it's like having a common language of value that everybody understands.
Yeah.
Regardless of where they live or what's happening with their local currency.
It just makes sense. Like you said, it kind of ties back into that estate planning piece too.
Right, exactly.
So let's get into that. Estate planning is so important. And it can be really complicated,
Mm,
especially with global families.
for sure.
So how do gold IRAs fit into all that?
So gold IRAs, they can help facilitate intergenerational wealth transfer, even across borders. And they work really well with estate planning.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind, though, is that you do need to be aware of cross-border tax laws.
Oh, yeah. This sounds like a headache.
Yeah, it can be a little tricky,
Yeah.
but
He was right.
there are ways to make it work.
Okay, good. So what do people need to be thinking about when it comes to the tax implications of gold IRAs?
Well, one thing is that you want to make sure you're not getting double taxed.
Oh, gosh. That sounds awful.
It can be, but
Uh-huh.
that's where tax treaties come in.
Oh,
So there are these agreements between the U.S. and other countries that are designed to reduce or eliminate double taxation.
okay.
So you definitely want to research those.
And if you've got family in another country, I imagine it would be a good idea to talk to an expert.
Oh, for sure. You'll want to work with someone who knows all the ins and outs of those tax treaties.
Absolutely. So that covers the tax implications for global families.
Yeah.
But what about for people in the U.S.?
Right.
Like, are gold IRAs taxed any differently than traditional IRAs?
So that's a great question. And the good news is that gold IRAs are treated very similarly to traditional IRAs when it comes to taxes.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, so you get all the same tax advantages.
Awesome.
Like tax-deferred growth.
Right. So your money can grow tax-free
Yeah.
until you need to withdraw it in retirement.
It's exactly.
I know there are different types of IRAs.
Yes.
Does that apply to gold IRAs as well?
It does. So you've got the two main types, traditional and Roth.
Oh, yeah, those sound familiar.
So with a traditional gold IRA, your contributions might be tax deductible, which can lower your tax bill now,
Yeah.
but you'll pay taxes when you withdraw the money in retirement.
So tax break now.
Right. With a Roth gold IRA, your contributions aren't deductible up front, but you get tax-free withdrawals in retirement.
So it's just like choosing when you want to pay the taxes.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about contribution limits?
So just like traditional IRAs, gold IRAs have annual contribution limits set by the IRS.
Okay.
And for 2025, that limit is $6,500 or $7,500 if you're 50 or older.
Got it. So let's say somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, you know what, a gold IRA sounds pretty interesting. What do they do next?
Well, one of the most important things is to find a good custodian.
Oh, yeah, custodian. We touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
But why is that so important?
Well, the custodian is the one who actually holds and manages the assets in your IRA.
Okay.
And they're responsible for making sure that everything is compliant with IRS regulations.
So they're like the gatekeepers.
Right, exactly.
Making sure everything's on the up and up.
And they handle things like storage, administration, all that stuff. So you can have peace of mind knowing that your assets are safe.
Okay, so choosing a custodian is a big decision.
It is. And if you need help with that,
Okay.
you can always check out goldirablueprint.com/exclusive.
Right.
They've got that free checklist there.
Yeah.
That can help you choose the right company.
Yes, I love that checklist. It's such a valuable resource.
For sure.
Okay, so we've talked about custodians. Let's dive back into estate planning a little bit more.
Okay. So we were talking about estate planning.
Right, and like what are some of the things people should be thinking about?
Well, one of the most important things is, like we talked about before, making sure you have your beneficiaries designated.
Okay, yeah, and why is that so important?
Well, it can really help your heirs avoid probate court,
Right.
which can be a long and expensive process.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with that.
Exactly. And then another strategy you can use is the stretch IRA.
Stretch IRA.
What's that? So with a stretch IRA, your beneficiaries can stretch out the tax-deferred growth of the inherited IRA over their own lifetimes.
Oh, wow.
So instead of having to take a lump sum distribution all at once
Right.
and potentially facing a big tax bill, they can spread it out over many years
Amazing.
and potentially continue to benefit from that tax-deferred growth.
Wow, so you're giving them like a real gift.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to kind of maximize the tax advantages of an IRA
Oh, sure.
and create a lasting legacy.
That's amazing. Are there any other estate planning techniques people should know about?
One other option to consider is using an IRA-owned trust.
Oh, interesting.
And this can give you a lot more control over how and when assets are distributed to your beneficiaries.
Oh, so like more customized?
Exactly. For example, you can specify certain conditions that have to be met before distributions are made.
Okay.
Or you can set up like a schedule. So
Yeah.
that just gives you a lot more flexibility.
That makes sense, but it sounds kind of complicated.
Yeah, it can be. IRA-owned trusts can be complex, so you really want to make sure that you plan carefully and that it complies with all the IRS regulations.
So probably a good idea to talk to an expert,
Absolutely. You want to consult with an estate planning attorney.
for sure. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Um, Learned about the basics of gold IRAs, how they can potentially protect you from inflation, the benefits for global families, and even some estate planning strategies.
Yeah,
It's been a really great conversation,
it has.
and I hope our listeners are feeling a lot more informed.
Me too.
But, of course, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to learn about gold IRAs and how they could potentially help you reach your retirement goals.
Yep.
So before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone about that website we mentioned earlier, goldirablueprint.com/exclusive. They've got that free checklist there
Yes.
that can help you choose the right gold IRA company, which is a great starting point
It is.
for anyone who's just beginning their research.
For sure.
So as you continue on your retirement journey and you're thinking about your future, consider how a gold IRA might potentially fit into your plan.
That's a great point.
Keep learning, keep asking questions, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
See you then.